Warning, the following podcast is intended for mature audiences and does contain spoilers. If you are sensitive to anything in particular, I recommend looking up this film on doesthedogdie.com. It is a user-submitted database that is filled with all sorts of different trigger warnings and content warnings for people who may be sensitive to those things. Check it out and take care of yourself. Welcome back to We Creeps, the podcast where you can get all of your spooky without any of the scares. I am your host, Evan Exhumed, and every week I provide an in-depth summary, review, and trivia for the latest horror releases, classics, and some weird ones you probably never heard of. Happy Halloween Eve! This week we will be covering the 1976 classic Halloween. The film stars a very young Jamie Lee Curtis, Donald Pleasance, PJ Soles, Nancy Kiess, Charles Cyphers, and Kyle Richards. Written and directed by John Carpenter, very famous horror movie legend, and also co-written by Deborah Hill. I have to be honest, I'm not a huge fan of the Halloween series at all. I've watched 1 through 6, and I have watched the Rob Zombie Halloween remakes. I thought they were mostly terrible. I think this is actually the only one I really like as like a film. I think H20 and Halloween Resurrection were really fucking funny movies and actually entertained me. But in terms of like an actual serious film, I think this is the only one that still kind of shines. Even though I do find it a little bit boring, I still think it is interesting from a historical standpoint. And to be fair, I find a lot of these 70s, 80s slashers to be quite boring and uninspired, but that's the thing. There wasn't much before this, so even though I don't really like them, I still find them interesting just as someone who is in love with this genre and really, really appreciates everything that these movies have done and inspired because they exist. So with that said, let's go ahead and get started on 1976 John Carpenter's Halloween. The movie begins with the original way that movies used to do the credits, which is list the entire cast at the very beginning. And we are made clear that this film takes place in Haddonfield, Illinois, specifically Halloween night 1963. We get a nice little first-person view of little baby Michael Myers, and he is sneaking into this house, and he picks up a kitchen knife, goes upstairs to where a naked girl is. Of course, gotta see some boobs. It's a 70s slasher, and he just stabs the shit out of her. And then he walks outside, and I guess the parents come home, or his parents. I think it's his sister, and he is just in the clown suit with a knife covered in blood, and they're just like, "What the fuck, Michael?" And yeah, he killed his sister, Judith, specifically. So then we fast forward to Smiths Grove, Illinois, October 30th, 1978. Here we see one of our main characters, Dr. Samuel Loomis, the psychiatrist for Michael Myers. He and a nurse are driving to the mental institution to get Michael for some kind of court hearing, I'm assuming, to judge him for the murder or something. I'm not sure. But as they pull up, all the patients are just wandering around in the dark in a stormy, rainy night. And the nurse is like, "Do they let them out normally?" And Dr. Loomis is just like, Are you serious right now? Why would they let them out in the rain?" So then as they're pulling up, Dr. Loomis gets out to try to open the gate to the main sanctuary or whatever. And then Michael Myers suddenly appears on the roof and just throws this nurse out and just begins to drive. He's never driven in his life, I assume, but he just kind of peels out. And Dr. Loomis is just like, "Fuck, we've let the evil out." So now we're back to Haddonfield, Illinois, in the day, Halloween Day. So knowing the name of the movie and the fact that it's Halloween Day in the movie right now, I think something might go down. So this is where we meet the main character, Laurie Strode. Her father is a real estate agent, and he is selling the long-abandoned childhood house that Michael Myers murdered his sister in. So she does a little jaunt over to the house and puts the key under the mat for the people who are going to be checking it out. She's a good daughter. She also runs into a boy named Tommy, who she is going to be babysitting later for Halloween night. And he's like, "Man, that place is cursed as hell." And she's like, "It's fine." So yeah, she puts the key under the mat, and as she's walking away, we see silhouette of Michael Myers. And as she says goodbye to Tommy and starts singing and going to high school and just walking there, we see Michael Myers again, just standing on the sidewalk staring at her. So I guess, he was really upset that she touched his doormat or something. I know why he's upset, and that comes up later in the movies, but we're just going to pretend that I haven't seen them. We then get a quick scene of Dr. Loomis talking with a colleague or his boss about Michael Myers getting away, and the boss is just like, how the fuck does he even drive? He's been locked up since he was 5. And Dr. Loomis is just like, man, fuck, I don't know. He was doing pretty good last night. We then get a short scene of Laurie being a good high school student, and she looks out the window, and there's Michael Myers in his creepy mask and his mechanic jumpsuit thing just standing by the car that he stole, and she just doesn't say anything. I feel like an average high schooler would be like, hey, who the fuck is that weirdo just standing there staring at the window? And then all the high school kids would look and make fun of him. But that doesn't happen here, so I don't know. Maybe the 70s were different. Then Michael Myers goes to visit Tommy, I guess, at his school, and everybody's making fun of Tommy for being afraid of Michael Myers, calling him the boogeyman, that he's going to get you on Halloween. He's sort of an urban legend, I suppose. And yeah, Michael Myers just kind of walks by him and stares, and then gets in his car and stares a little bit more, and then just kind of moves on. I mean, that's a lot of this movie is just Michael Myers staring at people. And, that might have been scary in the 70s, but that's just 2023, baby. We got stalkers all over the damn place. There's entire shows where the main character is a fucking stalker. It's called You, and it's quite well received on Netflix. So yeah, Dr. Loomis is still trying to get people to take this whole thing seriously. The cops aren't really taking him very seriously. And as he's on the payphone in the middle of nowhere, he notices a car that was driven off the road. He just somehow happens to be at this exact payphone. And it's assumed that that's where Michael Myers got his mechanic jumpsuit. So he then runs back to the payphone and starts shouting, I'm assuming at the police to let them know that he's killing once again. We're now back at Laurie's high school, where we meet 2 of her friends, Linda and Annie. They're talking about their plans for Halloween. I guess Linda wants to bone her boyfriend Bob, so she's going to go use the house that Annie or Laurie are babysitting kids in. I guess they're 3 houses down, so she's got options, I suppose. And as this conversation is happening, again, Michael Myers does a little drive-by, does some more staring. They yell at him and say, hey, speed kills. And he stops for a minute and then continues to drive forward. And again, they're just like, whatever, it's just some strange man. We then get another 5 minutes or so of Michael Myers just kind of stalking Laurie on her walk home. This movie has a lot of walking. I feel like you could easily get your 10,000 steps in a day if you just matched the pace of every walking scene in this movie. So Laurie takes a nap, and then she gets into Annie's car, and they both head to their babysitting jobs. We then go back to Dr. Loomis, who notices that there has been a robbery at one of the stores, a hardware store. The sheriff says, well, the only thing that was taken was a strange mask, some rope, and, a few knives. So nothing crazy, nothing serial killery. And one of my favorite parts, if you've watched this film in like 4K or high definition, you'll see in the background Michael Myers is driving away from the scene. But before he goes into the intersection, he looks both ways, like he turns his neck to check for oncoming traffic, which is hilarious because he like literally never moves his neck. He's always just staring straight forward. So the juxtaposition is just so fucking funny. If you've seen Halloween or are going to watch it, look for this scene and it'll crack you up. So Laurie and Annie reach their destination, not before Michael Myers, though, has somehow managed to start following them again. Based on just how much he moves around and how quickly his car gets to and from places, I feel like Michael Myers has a secret teleportation power. Like, I know within the movie he doesn't actually have that, but just he's so fucking fast at just finding the perfect place to just stand and stare, like ominously, that I just feel like he must have some kind of teleportation power. We then see Dr. Loomis and Sheriff Lee Brackett, who is Annie's dad, I guess, go to the Myers household to see if he's been there. We know he has. And we get a little backstory about Michael Myers. Basically, he's just insane, emotionally dead, black-eyed, sociopath, psychopath, just has no emotion. It's like a bear, basically. He just likes to kill stuff without really feeling any type of emotion behind it. And so the sheriff decides to, put an APB out or whatever for Michael Myers. We also learn that Dr. Loomis has a gun with him, so that will probably come up later. We then see a few scenes of Annie and Lori babysitting. Annie calls Lori, tells her that she told some guy named Ben or something, I don't know, that she was into him. And so Lori's like, oh my God, why would you say that? Just some like teenage girl stuff. And Michael Myers begins to stalk Annie outside of her house. She spills some like butter on her shirt, and so proceeds to just get completely naked aside from her underwear and puts on like a men's shirt or something. Again, 1970 slashers, lots of naked women. Michael then encounters the dog of the family that Annie is babysitting and kills the dog. So we hate Michael. Michael was fine before. The silent, strong type was fine before, but he killed a dog. I think multiple dogs, actually. I wasn't 100% sure earlier, so I didn't mention it. But yeah, he's killing dogs, and we're just not having that. So Annie ends up talking to her boyfriend on the phone, and his name is Paul or something, and he's like, hey, baby, why don't you come pick me up? We can go bang in the house that you're babysitting in. She's like, oh my God, fine. So she goes to drop off the little girl over at Tommy's house, which Lori is watching. And then Annie goes to pick up her boyfriend, but unfortunately, as she gets into her car, Michael Myers appears in the back of the car and strangles her to death. Rest in peace, Annie. Back at Tommy's house with Lori and the little girl, Tommy continues to see Michael Myers doing random shit outside. He sees Michael Myers with Annie's body going into the house, and he tries to tell Lori. He says, look, the boogeyman's out there. That shit is crazy. But Lori does not believe him. The little girl believes him, but Lori does not believe him. So I'm going to guess that this is going to cause problems later. We then go back to Linda, who is with her boyfriend, and they are headed to Annie's place. Well, the place that she was babysitting. And, they're making out, they're getting going, they're grooving, and of course this is going to go badly. So they make it up to the bedroom, have a little sexy time, and Linda, being a forward woman, says, "Go give me a beer." And so her boyfriend obliges. And as he's getting the beer, Michael Myers teleports and appears, and he strangles this young man and then stabs him through the chest into the wall. And the knife somehow is able to withhold this entire man's body. I guess Michael's just jammed it in there so tight that it works. So rest in peace, boyfriend. Michael Myers then comes back to a naked Linda in a cloth with holes cut out and the boyfriend's sunglasses on, or reading glasses. And he's just staring, but as a ghost. She then gets tired of what she thinks is her boyfriend's shenanigans and then calls Lori to talk to her. But then Michael Myers takes the ghost outfit off and strangles her to death while Lori's on the phone. And Lori's just like, man, are you still getting fucked over there? I don't want to be hearing that shit. And so she hangs up. Dr. Loomis then appears in the neighborhood after having tracked down Michael Myers' car, and he begins to search for Michael. Meanwhile, Lori is a bit concerned about her friend Annie and Linda. They haven't called her back, so she gets the keys to the house and begins to approach. As Lori begins to explore the house and see that it's empty, she goes up to the bedroom and finds one of her friend's corpses, I think it's Annie, just laid out on the bed with Michael Myers' sister's entire tombstone. Like the whole thing, just sitting where the pillows are. And I'm just like, how did this man carry this? Like I want to see the behind the scenes. Like I want to see this entire story from Michael's perspective, lugging that fucking thing around and bringing it up the stairs and setting it up and making sure the body looks perfect. Anyway, so Lori freaks out. Then she starts to see all the other bodies of her friends. One's in like a cabinet. One falls from the ceiling that I guess he pinned up there. And she's very upset, so she begins to scream and run away. At this point, Michael Myers makes himself known. He starts to stab or scratch at Lori. She falls off the stair banister and lands at the bottom of the first floor, but she's able to collect herself and run the fuck out of that house. She ends up making her way back to the house of Tommy's, the guy she's babysitting, and she gets in safely as Michael very slowly and not running at all walks over to her. Again, this movie is Walking Simulator. 1976, so there is not any running from Michael. She tells the kids to go hide. She hides by the couch, takes out a giant knitting needle, and prepares herself for Michael, and suddenly he appears right behind the couch, probably his teleportation power, and she stabs him in the fucking neck. Dr. Loomis at this same time is still just kind of wandering around the neighborhood looking for Michael, not knocking on any doors or anything, but just sort of walking, you could say. He's walking. Lori then goes to check on the kids, make sure they're okay, and she's like, don't worry, I killed this guy. And suddenly Michael is up and at him again, so she gets the kids to a safe room or something, and then she runs into another room and hides in the closet, but she opens the balcony door to make it look like she jumped out. However, Michael finds her and easily begins to break into the closet. She very quickly grabs a metal coat hanger, bends it into like a stick. She then stabs him in the eye, which is a pretty hard target to hit considering he's wearing a mask. And this does blind him temporarily, which is pretty goddamn clever. He then drops his knife and she quickly grabs it and then stabs him in the fucking gut. I mean, Lori is truly a final girl. Lori then heads over to the kids and tells them to get the fuck out of the house, run down the street, and call the police. As she is sitting there recuperating, of course, Michael Myers sits up and turns and starts to come for her. Dr. Loomis, however, sees the two kids running out of the house screaming, asking for help, and goes, I guess I should probably check that out. So as Michael is trying to now strangle Lori, Dr. Loomis comes up with his fucking Glock, and he just empties that motherfucker into Michael, just like, like just fucking goes off on this guy. And so Michael is shot enough times that he backs off the balcony and falls off the second story of the house onto the front lawn, assumedly dead. As Dr. Loomis goes to check on the body, he has disappeared. So Michael Myers, not only having teleportation powers, he apparently can survive 6 bullets straight to the body. And then the movie fucking ends. With the summary portion concluded, let's move on to the review portion of the show.
No. Be afraid. Be very afraid.
I gotta say, I have watched this movie a couple times now. I've attempted to watch it many times because the first time I ever watched it, I literally fell asleep. Second time I tried to watch it, fell asleep again. And then the third time, I finally was able to finish it. And then recording this podcast is the second time I've actually fully watched it. And I just gotta say, it has not aged well. It's, even just looking at this podcast right now, I've described most of the events in this movie and being kind of generous with it. Like, it's about 15 minutes of content, and the rest of the hour and a half of the movie is just walking. And I just don't really get it. Like, I mean, if I was a normal person who didn't watch horror movies and I lived in the 70s, I think that this movie would be pretty scary, mostly because it's not something I'm exposed to. But for people who are saying it's like one of the best horror movies ever made or franchises ever made, it's just, I don't get it. And I'm not going to yuck your yum. Like, this series just isn't for me. There are a lot of other series that I really love that are for me, but just Halloween is not one of them. In my opinion, if you did not like Halloween 1, then you should probably skip 2, 4, 5, and 6 because they all follow the same timeline. Halloween 3 is its own separate movie, which I didn't feel was very good. And then you have the Halloween H20 and Resurrection, which have Busta Rhymes and fucking LL Cool J. So, if you don't like the first timeline, you can try the second timeline, then you can try the Rob Zombie timeline, or you can try the modern timeline, which is a sequel to this movie, Halloween 2018, and then all the way up to Halloween Ends. So that's one continuous timeline. This franchise is a mess. Let's be honest here. Let's not fool ourselves. Let's not lie. I respect this franchise as, again, a piece of history and an influence, but it is just such a mess. With the review portion out of the way, let's go ahead and move on to the fun part, which is trick or trivia.
I saw the boogeyman. I saw him outside.
There was nobody outside.
There was.
What'd he look like?
The boogeyman.
Trivia number 1, John Carpenter concentrated specifically on all of Dr. Loomis's speeches, while the other writer, Deborah Hill, wrote most of the dialogue for the female characters. Trivia number 2. Because of having such a low budget, they had to do quite a bit to save money during the production, including picking Michael Myers' mask. The mask they used was a Captain James T. Kirk from Star Trek mask that was purchased from a costume shop for $2. They ripped off the sideburns and the eyebrows and painted it white. Trivia number 3, part of the reason that John Carpenter considered hiring Jamie Lee Curtis at all was because he thought it would be a cool tribute to Alfred Hitchcock, who had given her famous mother, Janet Leigh, the role of Marion in Psycho. That's all we have for Trick or Trivia. Join us again next week for more cool horror trivia.
I guess everyone's entitled to one good scare, huh?
We're now at the end of the episode, so thank you so much for listening this week. I hope you have a wonderful Halloween. But while you're out there getting spooky, don't forget to check out We Creeps' Linktree. This has links to my YouTube page, my TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, etc. If you want to support the podcast directly, I do have a Patreon linked there, as well as some merch. If you want to get a Stay Spooky Out There shirt or a We Creeps logo shirt, those are going to be in that Linktree. Or you can just go to wecreeps.com. One last thing, today is going to be the last day that you can enter for the Midsummer Collector's Edition and free t-shirt giveaway. Just go to my Instagram and follow the rules on the giveaway post. The winner will be announced October 31st on Halloween, so very fitting in my opinion. I hope you have a wonderfully spooky Halloween. Stay safe out there, don't drink and drive, but always do remember to stay spooky out there.